life so often gives us our greatest gifts, brilliantly disguised as our worst nightmares. And what that did for me was clear me of the prison that most people live in, which is the fear of what other people think. You know, when you're under that historic level of constant ridicule, when you can't walk down any street without being laughed at, when you can't go in a bar because there's uproar of ridicule, then when you stand in front of an audience of students and you can't speak for like 5 minutes because of the noise and the ridicule and the stuff. Then, you
know now, David. Excuse me. You know now, you were a free man, a free soul, a free spirit, and they sensed that, and they didn't like that. It scared them. It made them feel very ill at ease. Who is this guy? And that's why I think you were pounded and abused so badly. You were free.
Yeah. Well, I think because we live in such an inverted world, because of the way it's systematically constructed, people are frightened of freedom. They're frightened of spontaneity. Yeah. They're frightened of people who are different. It's always been the same throughout known human history.
Yep.
Because it's one of the things I talk about on the world tour. It's when you look at why people have such a myopic view of everything, you then look at the process of what we call life. You come out of the womb, and immediately your perceptions are influenced by your parents who've been through the system you're about to go through. You then, in a ludicrously short time after coming into this world, you're sitting at a desk with an authority figure telling you what is, what isn't, when you have to be there, when you can leave, when you can eat. And this goes on all the way through your formative years, where you are given the state's version of reality. This is the point. It's about what is, what isn't, what's possible, what's not possible. And then after you've gone out of the programming system called education, you then go into the institutions, you go into journalism or politics or science or medicine, whatever, and you take with you that core programming, that core download of the perception of normal, what I call the postage stamp normal, the postage stamp consensus. Mm-hmm. And this then defends itself from all borders, because you first of all have peer pressure to conform, because your peers have been through the same download and accepted it. And anyone who questions the download version of normal is not normal. And what is normal? Normal is just what we normally experience. That's all it is, and what we normally believe. And so you then have the mainstream media and much of the alternative media, I have to say, that also supports the normal in many, many ways.
Correct.
And all this information that you're receiving throughout your life is downloading that normal, a version of normal, and then constantly confirming that download is right, that download is how things are. And so when people come along and they, people like me are not just challenging 9/11, we're challenging absolutely every perception and assumption, right down to the fundamentals of what reality is. When someone's doing that, well, they're either mad or bad, because you can't handle it, because it's so far off your normal, and therefore they've got to be mad because you're normal. So they're saying something completely different. They must be mad. That's the definition. But what is happening now?
Let me say one thing about what you just made so clear. Normal, the download of normal, is really the imposition of limits, barriers, and parameters that we are supposed to stay in to be, quote, successful in life. Exactly. That's normal, correct?
That's normal. I mean, I tell you, there was just a little news story on the BBC website the other day. We've just had a little holiday. We call them bank holidays in this country. It's a period of about 3 days. And it said that shopping was down 4% over the bank holiday, and it was kind of a bad thing because it's bad for the economy. And you know, the point I made on that was, so fewer people buying things they overwhelmingly don't need with money they overwhelmingly don't have is bad. Yeah, well, what? That's good. But you see, what has happened is everything's inverted. Everything's upside down. But the upside down is how things normally are. Thus, that is normal. I mean, what is normal? You were born in the outback of Australia. Your normal is never seeing anybody and never seeing a car. You are born in downtown LA. Your normal is never not seeing people and never not seeing vehicles passing. And it's just the normal that you experience. Now, what the system does, what the program does, is it gives you a version of normal, which is how society is run on that basis. And so your normal is that myopic vision of possibility. And that's where people live in their heads from cradle to grave. This is so important. This is the absolute fundamental of how the few control the many. You can't do it physically to billions of people. You have to control their perceptions, because their perceptions of self, reality, and the world and world events leads to what they'll support, what they won't support, what they'll challenge, what they won't challenge. It leads to everything. Who they condemn, who they blame, who they don't blame. It all comes from perception. And what we're looking at, the whole bottom line of this conspiracy, it's a perception deception. It's a manipulation of perception. And so the revolution is not stockpiling weapons and fighting the bad guys. It's actually a revolution of perception, because from that revolution of perception comes a revolution of action, and therefore a revolution of change.
Perception management, it's all about perception control. And once that is shaken or cracked, and the paradigm begins to weaken, people begin to push against those cracks and they want to move out. It's not normal for them to be held cradle to grave in such a constricted state. I completely agree. This is, and what you've just spelled out in the last 10 minutes is really the key to virtually everything and the liberation of our planet, our people, our species. We have been so engineered into perception prison. It's not funny. We got 5 corporations now here in the U.S. running 95 to 98% of the media. It's no contest.
Yeah, when you look at the American political scene, particularly since the 1980s, I mean, it's kind of breathtaking when you look at it, because first of all, what most people won't realize, because the mainstream media won't tell them, is that the Clintons and the Bushes are extremely close bosom buddies. They were running drugs through the Mena airstrip in Arkansas when Clinton was Bill Clinton was governor. That was in my books in the mid 1990s. You know, I remember tracking the Clintons a long time. I mean, crikey! I mean, they've not just got skeletons in the cupboard; they've got whole cemeteries. These people, and what we are looking at, therefore, is this idea that America is free because anyone can become president. Well, let's go back to 1980. It was Reagan-Bush, which in fact was Bush-Reagan in terms of the power in the White House. Indeed. So Father Bush had 2 terms as a de facto president. He then had 1 term as the official president. He's then replaced by 2 terms of Clinton, who is replaced by 2 terms of Boy Bush, who is replaced by Obama, who now could be replaced very likely by another Clinton. I mean, there are more than 300 million people in America. How can that be unless it is absolutely contrived? And if it's contrived, who's contriving it? These are the questions that people need to ask. And when you ask them, the answers are very different to the world that people think they live in.
Yeah. It's all about asking the right questions. People just don't ask. They react, and they do. I remember when you used your message of, your classic message of problem, reaction, solution. is so rudimentary to understanding organized societal life on this planet. It's how the game is played. And all these clubs, all these so-called religions, political parties, it doesn't matter. They're simply control mechanisms to enable the download to be completed. And whatever color paint the download is, it doesn't matter. It's still a download of barriers, parameters, and limits. And you're not supposed to go out. You're supposed to stay inside.
Yeah, that's why the real revolution is stepping outside of those parameters and living your life outside of that, speaking your truth outside of that, doing what you feel is right outside of that, rather than being cowed into just following the normal out of fear of the consequences of not following the normal. I mean, it starts with parents. Our parents set parameters that are of great limitation on children in terms of what they can think, what they can do, what they can say. It starts right at the earliest time in people's lives and goes all the way through. And what I'm finding, Jeff, is this is a phenomenon that I'm finding in more and more people. So something is happening. It's people who have reached the point where they've been through this system. They've followed the carrot. I must be someone. I must do this. I must achieve this.
Oh, false gods. Absolutely.
Gotta. And they've kind of reached that point where they were aiming for. They might be the CEO. They might have made a few bob. And they're at this point, maybe in their 50s, actually some even earlier, and they're saying, what was it all about? Okay,
yes.
I've strived all my life. I've what was it that John Lennon said? Life is what happens to you while you're busy making other plans. And suddenly they're there, but they don't feel any different. And it's like, it's been a hoax. Well, that's exactly what it is. It's a hoax. It's putting that carrot just in front of you. This is what you need to do. This is what life is about. It's about striving. It's about achievement. It's about being someone. It's about being seen as being someone. It's about fame. It's about money. It's about power. All these things. And you follow the carrot, and then eventually you get there. Well, most people don't get there because the system won't let them. But some people get there, and when they get there, they don't feel any different. And all their life has passed, and they don't really want to admit to themselves, first of all, that it has been a hoax, because they don't want to admit they've been hoaxed, and their life has been, chasing a dream that turned out to be not a dream at all. But there's more and more people that I'm coming across, and like I say, the numbers are so common now that there is something happening. People are having this reassessment. What is life about? And once you said a few minutes ago, it's about asking the right questions. That's exactly what it is. And when you start asking those questions, yes, what is it all about? Why do we do this? Then the system starts to crumble in your perception of it, because the answers are, we do it for no good reason other than
we're told to do it.
The few to control the many. Yeah.
It's so good to hear you say this. You travel, you have contact with people face to face. I don't. I live in a little thimble. And to hear you say that people are getting it. And I'm also hearing you say that they're getting it in a very broad brushed, common sense way that will give them a new, let's just call it a new beginning, a new bedrock, they're formulating a new bedrock from which that they can operate for the rest of their lives and look at things and see. I think people, from what I'm gathering, are seeing through the lie. And if ever in this country people trust the mainstream media again, shame on them. It has been exposed, you and I know it, and most of our listeners tonight know it, as the biggest hoax, fraud, control mechanism, down and dirty control mechanism that you could ever see. And they are liars, they are whores, they're prostitutes, they're the worst. And you know why I walked away from television news after 12 years. I could see where it was going. Mass mind control. Disgusting. And so I started this program because the human mind is still somewhat, it does enjoy sanctity, and that's what I wanted to go after. Same with you.
Well, the thing about perception, where does perception come from? It comes from, yes, experience, which gives you a perception through experience. But and experience is a form of information, if you break it down. And the rest of perception comes from information that we call information, which is from the media. It's from the laughingly, bravely, ludicrously called education system. And so your perceptions are formed by the information you receive. And so if you are seeking to program perceptions, then you have to control information that people receive, because that's the only way you're going to do it. And what the alternative media has done, and of course, people talk about the alternative media as if it's one thing. It's not. It's a vast spectrum from, on one side, imperceptibly different from, almost from the mainstream, across to those that are questioning every facet of belief and normal. But the alternative media has, within that spectrum, offered people another information source, another way of looking at the world and world events. And the mainstream postage stamp normal version is so ludicrous, so limited, so just without credibility that it cannot stand the challenge of an alternative view. This is why mystics and seers and mavericks of various kinds throughout human history have always been seen as dangerous by those in authority at the time. Why? Because they're offering another way of looking at everything that is different from what the authorities are trying to sell, whether it's religion, in the past or whatever. It's another way of looking at things. And that is the most dangerous thing that can possibly happen to that which is seeking to impose and program a perception, alternative ways of looking at things. But what I'm finding very encouraging is, you know, well, of course, the mass ridicule and all this stuff 26 years ago, 25 years ago, it was clear there weren't many who were open to looking at the world in a different way. But that has changed. That has changed dramatically. The kind of people that, I mean, the moment, you know, I'm going into cafes for a cup of tea to read my paper, but I don't read my paper because people are coming up to me all the time wanting to talk to me about this information. And they're all across the spectrum of society. That there is something happening. And I think that, you know, 3 years from now, we are going to be in a very different place in terms of the numbers of people who are saying, hold on a minute, this is making sense. What's going on? And this is the other thing. This is a very important aspect of this. I said many, many years ago that there's going to come a point where that which has manipulated from the hidden will have to appear in the seen. Because if you're going to transform human society in a certain way, there comes a point where it has to become obvious that that's what's going on. Not necessarily that there is a hidden hand behind it, but the fact that society is changing very demonstrably, and to the point where people are going, hold on a minute, what's going on here? And this manifests, of course, in the increasing concern about the level of surveillance and what have you. And we're at that point now where the hidden is actually having to appear in the seen in changes in society, and that is making more and more people question what's going on. I mean, the idea that, I mean, when you look at the amount of money that's spent on surveillance and all that side of it, and destruction of privacy, and then you look at the number of people who are affected by terrorism in the West in terms of numbers, and compare that with the number of people that die in road accidents, number of people that
45,000 a year, David. 45,000 a year die in the U.S. on the roads.
Yeah, and so it's not about protecting life, this terrorism spending. Of course it's not this mass surveillance and control system. It's about building a control system that will prevent rebellion by the masses, if you like, against the less than 1%.
Is it not an admission that the mainstream media can't do the job anymore and they've got to have surveillance to back it?
This plan for the world is projected long into what we call the future. And it's unfolding. I mean, I go into some really deep levels of reality and how it works. But if you look at Orwell, he talked about the telescreens. Well, these are the smart TVs, and the smart TVs we have now are only Mark 1 or Mark 2. I mean, the surveillance that they give, filming you and recording you in your own front room. But there was and then you look at Aldous Huxley, who was talking about the drugs and the genetics, which is all unfolding as well. So they were tapping into, for whatever reason, into this projected plan for the future. And about 20 years after Orwell's 1984, in 1969, there was a guy called Dr. Richard Day. He was a Rockefeller insider. He was an executive of Planned Parenthood, and in 1969 he was addressing pediatricians in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, and just told them, for whatever reason, what he was doing, but he told them to not take notes and not record, because he was going to tell them how the world was going to change, because basically what he represented was going to change it, was changing it. And one doctor, Dr. Dunnigan, did take notes and did some interviews before he died about what Richard Day said that day. It's extraordinary.
It is amazing.
What he said in detail. Yeah. The reason I mention that is because he indicated in what he said was coming, and the way he described what was coming technologically. He described the World Wide Web. He certainly described smart TVs, and the World Wide Web was supposed to be invented around the 1989, something like that, and he talked about it in 1969, and of course, fundamental to this whole technological AI takeover, and I could talk at great length about it and what's happening in front of our eyes if we only could see it.